Hey, welcome everybody. Are you ready to reduce your food waste? I'm Bob Henkel, the program director here at Earth Day 365. This is the beginning of a three-part program series this week, looking at the sustainability waste hierarchy from reduce, reuse, recycle. Today, we're starting with recycle portion, looking at composting food waste with Matt Arthur and Adam Higgins with the BLH Farm. And they're going to be sharing their vast knowledge and information around how they've supported residents with food waste composting, how they manage their flower and herb farm with composting. And I think you're going to really enjoy this, this presentation. Tomorrow, we will be focused on the reuse portion with a 1 o'clock event with Kitchen House Coffee, talking about creative reuse of leftovers. And then on Thursday, we'll have Margaret Lilly from the St. Louis County Department of Health talking about strategies for your home around reducing food waste. And we're always striving to get to that, start with reducing, reusing what you can, and then recycling. So without further ado, thanks for being here. If you have any questions or comments, I've got Elizabeth monitoring the chat function, so you can populate stuff in there, and we can make sure that this can be an engaging conversation between you and our local farmers. Welcome, Matt and Adam. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Bob. So I'm Matt Arthur from BLH Farm, and Adam's also on the line. We're going to talk through Bokashi composting in some detail and also talk about how it's different from the thermophilic hot piles that are probably the most common composting method in the United States. We're a cut flower farm with herbs. We focus on soil health. We also operate a residential composting service in St. Louis. We pick up about 1,200 pounds of food waste a week from the curb, different households, and process it all through Bokashi composting and feed it to our composting worms, with some going into hot piles for thermophilic compost. We also sell composting supplies, including composting worms, worm towers, Bokashi kits, and Bokashi Bran. Our Instagram's on the screen. We try to keep photos up on what we're doing, keep our community aware of our activities. So mission statement, we really believe in soil health. We're totally no-till farm. We don't disturb the soil once we form beds. We don't use any chemical inputs. We manage pests through integrated pest management system. And our goal is to both provide fertility for our farm through our composting service, but also enable the wider community to keep their own food waste out of landfills to feed their own soil for healthy plants. We really like Bokashi composting because of its scalability. It's the most flexible system we've used, and we've seen it work really well for single household, all the way up to community gardens and community composting efforts. So we're going to share that scalability today. All right, Bokashi. It just means fermented waste. Bokashi comes out of East Asia. It's preeminent in North Korea, South Korea, and Japan. It's an anaerobic system, so it takes place without oxygen in a sealed container. And it's not a composting method in terms of a carbon cycling method. It's actually a fermentation, so it's more akin to making sauerkraut or kimchi than anything else. And it's a process that's really driven by lactobacillus and other effective microbes that we'll talk about in later slides.
So can we eat this, Matt?
Can you eat it? Yeah,
I don't know.
You could. I don't think you wouldn't want to, but you could. The microbes at work produce a really, yeasty, acidic mix, so it'd be pretty unpleasant, but I think you safely could eat it.
Wow, I love it. I just like to keep things kind of fun and
yeah. I don't know, no one's ever asked us that before. It's a good question.
You just said kimchi and other kinds of fermentation, like sauerkraut. So I was like, it came to my head. All right.
Yeah, you could, yeah. And in the end of it, you're going to get kind of a dry pickled food waste or fermented food waste, and you're using it to feed the subsoil organisms directly. So hot compost, you're getting an undifferentiated, crumbly organic material that's typically top dressed onto beds. Bokashi, it still looks like food waste, and you'll see later what finished Bokashi looks like. And rather than sprinkling on top of the ground, you're burying it underneath the ground so that the existing soil microbes get a boost of food.
I love that idea of feeding the soil microbes. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really the thing that makes Bokashi such a great option for soil health in our experience. So Bokashi, quickly what's happening, lactobacillus, it's lactic acid producing bacteria found in the air everywhere. They dominate early. They produce a lot of lactic acid in this oxygenless environment. They drop the pH in the container pretty dramatically down to the high threes. That pH dropping is what knocks down pathogens. So in a hot pile, you're getting to 130 degrees plus for 3 or more days, which is effectively pasteurizing the food waste to knock down, listeria and salmonella, whatnot. In Bokashi, the pH is doing it. The pH drop also leads to the cell walls rupturing. A lot of liquid comes out. That liquid's drained off. And after the lactobacillus is done working, the pH is stable. The secondary EM, which are effective microbes, take over. We have yeast, Actinomycetes, and other things. After 2 to 3 weeks, you have this anaerobic, stable, fermented state where the food waste won't change in appearance anymore. It's effectively finished the process. And we like to think of it as an excellent pre-composting. It's not a finished product that you would use as a direct topsoil amendment, but it's broken down so it's available for soil microbes to finish that job.
That's great. Maggie McCoy just chatted that she just buried her first batch of Bokashi in her soil and is super excited to plant stuff in it. Thanks,
cool.
Maggie.
Yeah, Maggie, send us a picture in like 3 weeks. Take a shovelful, dig it up, and send it to us. We love seeing it. You shouldn't see anything. Just to touch on thermophilic. So hot composting, it's aerobic, so it needs oxygen to work. It's really carbon cycling. What's happening is the organisms in that pile are actually breaking carbon chains, and they're changing the form of the carbon to cycle it through. We're not doing that in Bokashi, so it's a totally different process altogether. Really driven by bacteria, aerobic bacteria, some fungi, insects play a big role. By far the most widespread composting method in North America. Typically, industrial composters are doing windrows, maybe between 8 and 12 feet as a semicircle, so huge windrows, 100 yards or more, turned with tractors, sprayed with water. It's a very functional way of disposing of huge amounts of food waste. You do need a pile temperature of 130 days at least. The U.S. Composting Council requires measurements. You've really got to document that, because if you don't sustain the temperature, you don't get the knockdown of human pathogens. You run the risk of taking compost that appears finished but actually harbors Listeria, Salmonella, these really problematic organisms, and then spreading it directly onto your plants in your garden, and then having them be uptaken into like tomatoes and melons and other water dense fruits, and then spreading human illness. It's also the most common backyard method, and in our experience, it's the least successful. Thermophilic composting requires a lot of management, that both in terms of material supply and moisture, that is a challenge a lot of people find overwhelming. It does produce a really nice homogeneous material, that crumbly, dark brown or black compost that we make a lot of still, and we really love it. But we make ours from Bokashi, and we'll talk about how we do that.
Yeah, Matt, I remember building in my suburban yard when I had one. I was lucky to have a lot of grass that I was able to bag and add, and the grass clippings were integral to getting the heat up to those temperatures.
Yeah, you really need that mix of green to brown, and the volume required is substantial. A hot pile needs to be a cubic yard, so 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet tall in order to reach temperature typically. And you think about, that's probably several hundred pounds of food waste and carbon material, and the average household in St. Louis produces 7 to 10 pounds a week. You just can't get to the temperature. So you're not getting aerobic composting, you're just getting semi-aerobic putrefaction or non-thermophilic rotting.
Yeah, because I also had to import a bale of straw too,
Mm-hmm.
to add carbon to help keep the the pests away, you know?
Yeah, and
The
straw
possum,
adding your carbon
the
sources, unfortunately, are often a source of persistent herbicide contamination. So straw is a chief culprit. Most straw in the United States, by far in the high 90%, is treated with pyraclids, other persistent or semi-persistent herbicides, 2,4-D, and pyrachlor and other pyraclids that can remain active for 1 to 3 years. So you run the risk of making compost at home, spreading your garden bed, and then just smoking everything you planted. It's really common, unfortunately. Here's a chart. I want to talk through the differences between Bokashi and Thermophilic before we talk about what we do. So Bokashi, it's a sealed container. That can be the bin that we sell, we really like. It can be a couple 5-gallon buckets with holes in the top one, sealed with a lid. It can be a 50-gallon drum like we used to use. It can be a 96-gallon roller that we currently use, as long as it's airtight and has a spigot. Thermophilic, perforated bin, has to let air through. Bokashi, commonly done indoors, small batches. I'm talking 20 pounds or so, which is 2 to 3 weeks for most households in a batch. Thermophilic, you have to have a cubic yard of mixed carbon and nitrogen. Bokashi stays ambient temperature. It's never going to heat up. It's fermenting. It's not cycling carbon, doesn't produce heat. Thermophilic has to be 130 degrees plus, and a large pile, we're talking 1.5 yards, 2 yards or more. You're managing it actually to keep it cool, because the mass will get easily up to the high 160s, and larger piles can go into the 170s, and actually they can spontaneously combust. They produce at that temperature a bunch of aromatic alcohols that can catch fire. So the temperature management is pretty key. I should have said 130 to 160. Both methods do a really good job of rendering pathogens and weed seeds non-viable, just totally different process. In terms of what you need to add to your composting system to keep them healthy, Bokashi, all you're doing is adding an inoculated bran that provides a jumping off point for the microbes that we want, the fermentation microbes. Thermophilic, the microbes doing this are everywhere. They're on the food, they're in the ground, they're in the air. It takes care of itself. But you need to add a lot of carbon and water. Carbon, you need a 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So you're thinking nitrogen is greens, it's your food waste. Carbon is your browns, it's paper, wood chips, leaves. You got to shred those to the right size and get that ratio right. Too much carbon won't heat up. Too little carbon, it just rots, and it's a putrid pile. It's, I think we've probably all seen those kind of leaching, ammonium-rich, stinky liquid and not really doing much. And you got to keep it wet. You got to turn it. Bokashi, all you're doing to manage it is just draining out the leachate. Your container ideally has a spigot at the bottom. It doesn't have a spigot. If you're doing a DIY, 2 5-gallon bucket, you're lifting out the top one and draining the bottom one. Effective, but kind of messy. Thermophilic, you got to turn it, so you're incorporating oxygen. Depending on the pile and the time of year, you're turning every ideally 3 days to a week, a couple weeks, and you're adding water during that time so it stays moist. Runs dry, it's just going to stall out. If you are using a backyard bin, I really like the 3-bin system. 3 bins, a cubic yard each, with hardware cloth in between. And we've got a link to some pretty good plans from Washington State on our website. But be aware, it's a management-rich endeavor.
Yeah. Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Rachel just asked, what do you do with the leachate from your process?
Yeah. So for homeowners, not homeowners, households, I say most commonly people just pour it down the drain. It's not dangerous or toxic. It's, it's just a byproduct. If you want to dilute it 50-to-1 and put it on your yard, that's great. It is acidic, so dilution is pretty key. Or if you have acid-loving bushes, we're thinking blueberries and hydrangeas, you can dilute a little bit less and add it to there. It does contain some effective microbes, contains some nutrients, mainly lipids from the foods, some trace minerals, but it's really a personal choice. Great. I wouldn't recommend drinking it.
All right, back to my original question, right?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this, Bob.
I'm hungry, right? It's lunchtime.
Yeah, no, it's, leachate, it's like worm tea. It's like, well, not worm tea. It's like worm leachate too. People with worm bins often love spreading the drippings from the worm bin out. To me, honestly, that's just a byproduct that is not particularly valuable. It's fine. It's perfectly suitable for being spread in the yard, but it's not like the main outcome of this. The outcome is the finished bokashi that's really going to be eaten by soil microbes.
That's a great, I really appreciate how you're setting up that comparison. It's really helpful.
Great, yeah. Okay, so pests, this is where I think bokashi really shines. There are no pests in a bokashi bin. You seal that lid on, it's airtight. It's not suitable for any fly eggs or fruit fly eggs to hatch. It's highly acidic. Nothing's going to hatch out in there. It's not going to be full of maggots. It won't be full of fruit flies. It's really a nice contained system, and it's because it's so scalable. It can be, you know, the 4-gallon kit that we sell. It can be a 5-gallon that you make. It can be a 50-gallon drum you modify. It can be a 96-gallon roller like we use. Any scale you're doing, you just seal it, and it's pest free. It's awesome. Hot piles. Even the best managed hot pile remains highly attracted to almost everything: mice, snakes, flies, small mammals. In St. Louis, we've made thousands of pounds of hot piles, tons of hot piles. And, you know, black soldier fly season, it doesn't matter what size mesh you're using, soldier flies will lay eggs in there. Those hot piles will be, come June, primarily, you know, swarms of crawling maggots, which are fine. They're not harmful. They're just consuming food waste. They're voracious eaters, but they're kind of gross. Snakes make their home there, particularly in the fall and winter. They stay warm. The edge of the pile is a perfect snake habitat. You go out to turn it in December and you fork over the next bin, and there's just a, you know, den of snakes. It can be off-putting, even garden snakes. Even well-managed piles, you know, you will have some flies, particularly early stages. There's ways to mitigate that. You can case the pile in a thick layer of finished compost, can put kind of a denser layer of carbon on the outside, but once you turn it a couple times, it's hot. It's not even partially degraded yet. There are still chunks of food that are suitable for flies. You will get some odor. Again, casing with compost helps that, but there is some smell potential even in a backyard bin. And mice are incredible. They get through anything. We used both 1/2-inch and 1/4-inch hardware cloth on different bins when we were doing hot composting as our go-to. You know, mice make dens in there, and you're forking, and there's a bunch of baby mice. Again, I don't think it's a real health risk, but it can be surprising. Actually, Adam, not to get too far afield, Adam was turning a pile. We were still doing hot piles. He turned a pile, uncovered a den of mice, and a hawk we hadn't seen flew down like 1.5 feet away from him and took a mouse and flew off. So that was, you know, I don't know, noteworthy. So anyway, the pest man.
I love that story. I just wanted you to get a little feedback on that. You know,
I just heard him shout and turn around, and it's like, what's going on? You know, we're just turning piles, and it's amazing. But the pest pressure is noteworthy. Particularly, backyard piles are typically a lasagna method. Most people start off by building a bin with a layer of green, a layer of brown, and then turning later. And in that first initial bin preparation or bin fillage, that's when you get most of these pests. And it can be, depending on where you are, nothing but raccoons tearing the screen and possums climbing in, or it can be just a little bit of, you know, little insect pressure.
yeah, and once they find the pile, then they know to come back. So, like for me, I was really meticulous with my backyard pile, and the possum actually was in the garbage can 10 feet away in my neighbor's yard, and never came into my pile because I'd made sure that I had the right amount of carbon and everything else to keep the smells down. And I always buried my food waste way down on the bottom of the pile, you know, from my kitchen scraps. And it does take some management. I enjoyed the 5-10 minutes it took me a week to manage that pile, and I had a big pile for 3 years that I just kept cycling through like that.
No, I don't want to say you can't do it. We've
right.
had backyard bins for a decade, and it produces a really nice output. And we make hot compost now because it's so useful for seed starting mixes, and mainly seed starting mixes. But we make our hot piles with bokashi as the starting point. because once it's been through the Bokashi process, it's much less desirable to animals. That fermented, acidic, kind of yeasty smelling food waste has almost nothing in common with just pure kitchen scraps. And you can put meat and meat products in the Bokashi bin, and they get processed too. So
I was going to ask you what, if you have a slide on what can go in there, because I'm loving this Bokashi idea, because I live in an apartment now, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too, or they have very limited backyard space here in the city.
Yeah.
So
you don't
really
want to put a 9 foot long bin with a big lid on it. Yeah, Bokashi could take everything. Hot piles can too. There's no reason you can't compost meat. Again, at the backyard scale, if you have a small pile that's not going to get up to temperature in a couple of days, you're probably not putting meat in because it's just too desirable. When we were doing food waste directly at a hot pile, we were making piles that were 5 or 6 feet square and 4 feet tall, and so they get to temperature in a couple of days. They're cooking. But for most people who are using a tumbler or a small bin, you're talking best case it's going to be weeks before it really starts going. That's really tempting for animals.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep going on this chart. Highlight these differences between the two. Bokashi, you don't lose any mass. You're not cycling carbon. You're not breaking carbon chains. You're not consuming the mass through this enormous microbe load that a hot pile has. You're fermenting it. You lose about 5%. It's mainly things that come out in the leachate. So lipids, fats are really the thing that come out. Thermophilic. This is from the U.S. Composting Council. 55% loss is the average loss for a hot pile. Can be more, depends on management. Sometimes a year, some food stocks, you will lose more, and that's all being consumed by microorganisms, then released in the atmosphere as carbon. A lot of methane, a lot of other stuff. Again, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it's more of a focus now, particularly at the city scale, when they have just acres and acres of hot piles. It's a pretty significant carbon source. One little comment, the finished carbon and nitrogen ratios are pretty different for Bokashi to Thermophilic. And that ratio dictates a lot of what happens in the soil. Typically, we want a higher carbon ratio to prioritize fungus in the soil. We have 19:1 for Bokashi and 10:1 for Thermophilic. That's really because in the Thermophilic, you're just consuming so much of that carbon just to get the pile to temperature. So people who are really watching carbon ratios in their soil, like this one, most of our soil is pretty heavily carbon deficient. In many ways, modern farming is carbon farming. We're adding nitrogen as a supplement both to grass, but also to all of our row crops. We're really using existing soil carbon and extracting that with the presence of this artificial nitrogen to produce higher yields. And Bokashi having more carbon in it without adding carbon is an excellent way of countering that, either in our home gardens or in fields. Finally, use case, Bokashi, we're burying it beneath the soil surface. What we're doing is we're feeding microbes in the soil. You're taking food waste, you're fermenting it, making it highly accessible to soil organisms and earthworms. And then you're burying it, you want the top to be 3 or 4 inches below the surface. So thinking 6 to 8, max 10-inch trench you're digging, putting the Bokashi in, putting soil on top so that the root zone effectively, where the mass of soil organisms is fed with this very accessible, easily degraded food stock. Thermophilic, it's totally finished. There's very little activity. You're top dressing it onto the soil surface, or if you're planting new plants, you might put it in the root zone, but typically it's top dressed. I'll pause there if there are questions.
There are just a couple comments. Rachel said that she does backyard composting 3-bin system, and it does take a long time to get that initial mass to get up to temperature. It took her 1.5 years to get hot compost.
Yeah,
wow.
That sounds about right.
And then Ian said he's not sure how, but the backyard compost method, which is a lazy method and turning maybe 1/5 of the pile while adding food scraps once a week tops, is not very hot, but has thousands of worms. So it works like vermicomposting. And it's pretty weird, but it works for them in their garden.
Good. Yeah, our goal is to have everybody keep their food waste at home. If a 3-bin system works and they have space, all all power to them. I really like a 3-bin system for producing hot composting. I'll note the grass we have, we don't bag that grass, and so we're cutting and dropping. So really, we're only putting food waste in, and that means we're really adding carbon from either stored leaves or if we have spare wood chips from the farm. But materials management is another challenge. Anything else?
Yeah,
And that's great. Oh, you got this one? Okay.
It's okay. There's another question from Mike. How does the buried finished Bokashi material affect soil pH?
Yeah, that's a great question. The soil pH neutralizes pretty quick. It doesn't have a long-term drop in pH that we've seen. And it's the quantity of organisms in the soil really just tear through, and it comes up to not neutral, but to ambient soil pH pretty quickly, which is for us like 6.3 to 6.5.
And then do you think those soil microbes, are they using straws to suck up that leachate coming out of there, or what? Maybe reusable stainless steel ones, or what?
Yeah, the volume of leachate's so tiny, if you're thinking you have a couple cups, you have a cup every time you drain it, dilute it into a couple gallons, few gallons, it's nothing. I mean, healthy soil, even healthy grass can absorb inches an hour, and it's just nothing. So.
Right. And just also want a little shout out from Ian to remind folks that this is our recycle portion of the reduce, reuse, recycle. And we know that on the hierarchy, the first step in food waste is to reduce how much food waste you have. So make sure you manage your shopping list and your leftovers appropriately, and so that you have less food going into this system. But then when you do, you will have food scraps. So using like this Bokashi method or the pile method are great alternatives to throwing food waste in the trash. And that's the big thing, is that we're trying to get food waste out of the trash system and put it where it's needed, into our soils, and to feed the microbes, to feed the plants that we want to eat.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Anything but landfill it. I mean, honestly, that's anything but landfill.
Right.
So what's happening? How do you do it, right? So at a high level, choose a container that's airtight, that you can drain liquid out of. Commercially made kit with integrated spigot for the household, 2 5-gallon buckets with holes drilled in. The bottom one catches liquid, the top one's your working bin, tight fitting lid. You prep it, you just close the drain valve if you have one. You do want a grate in the bottom of the bucket. Again, the kits come with a grate. If you're making your own, just make sure you have a way to keep liquid away from the bottom level of food. Sprinkle bran on. Bokashi Bran is the brand we make at our farm. You want the bran that's inoculated with effective microbes. Beneath the first layer of food, add food waste as a layer, put more bran on, add more food, put more bran on, pack down periodically to keep air pockets out. Again, it's anaerobic, so it has to be free of oxygen. Repeat it until it's full, whether that's a day, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, doesn't matter. Repeat it. Seal the lid between each time you add food. Limit the amount of air that gets in. When it's totally full, just store the bucket somewhere, at least 2 weeks. Going longer is fine, but a couple weeks is minimum working time. And then drain that liquid out every couple days. This is where the DIY kits are tough to work with, because initially you get quite a bit of leachate. I mean, as that lactobacillus goes through the food, you do get a lot of liquid draining out, particularly summertime when we're eating, liquid-rich fruits and vegetables. A lot of leachate. You need to get that leachate out so the bottom layer is not sitting in food. Every couple days at the beginning, every 3 to 4 days later. Don't open the bin. Oxygen disrupts it. Again, DIY bins, most of the problems we hear about, people make 5-gallon buckets nested. Well, you pull the bucket out to get the leachate from the bottom one, right? The top one has holes drilled in. Air just rushes into those holes during it, and then air pools in the bottom. So bottom layers tend to be, less solid. It's fine. After 2 to 3 weeks, it's finished. We'll go over it later, but basically you're burying it in the garden, or you're putting it in a planter with soil below and above it, feed to composting worms, add to an outdoor pile, or feed to poultry. There's a couple other things you can do we'll talk about later, but those are the main ones by popularity. And then just start over again. Typically, households have two bins. One is kind of the working bin that you're adding new food waste and bran to, and the second one is fermenting while you're filling the first one. So by the time you've filled one, the second one's ready to use, and then you can empty it and just use it directly again. Okay, we've talked a lot about bran. I want to do a slide on what it is and how we use it. Basically, it's a carbon-rich substrate, typically from an agricultural surplus or waste product. So in the Midwest, we're lucky to have Janie's Mill. We get organic wheat bran from Janie's Mill in Illinois. They're a family farm and mill that grows some heirloom wheat and other small grains. The bran is a byproduct that is used for some consumer goods, but is mainly a waste product. It's all carbon. It's milled really fine. It's milled in a semi-sterile environment. It's very dry when it's milled, and it's a clean mill. So there are very few chances for other microbes to hop onto it, mainly because it's dry. And each grain has tons of surface area. It's a tiny little milled, piece of wheat bran. So once it has effective microbes on it, relative surface area is very high. Each bit of bran is an inoculation point for the Bokashi microbes. And those microbes, the term effective microbes came from the researcher in Japan who popularized this in the 80s. Effective microbes, his research into traditional Bokashi in Japan and Korea showed that this mix of bacteria, yeast, fungi was really effective for the process. It's been standardized now. It's manufactured by a couple specialty brewers in the US, and we buy effective microbes from them. A little goes a long way. We're talking a few cups to make a couple 100 pounds of bran, and that's what the bran is. This is how we make bran. We make it. We buy it by the sling bag.
Hey Matt,
Yeah.
You have a question.
Oh, sorry.
You have two questions.
Let's hear 'em.
First, can spent brewing grains be used to ferment in place of wheat bran? And the second question, similar, are there alternatives you can use, for example, used oats?
So brewers' grains aren't suitable because they've been effectively inoculated with yeasts in the brewing process. So typically those are really wet and have already been colonized by either intentional yeast or atmospheric yeasts or fungi. So you really need a brand new source, but we use wheat bran. Rice husks are often used. Soybean hulls can be used. Anything that is a carbon heavy byproduct that can be milled fine is suitable. And I think Missouri, it's really rice or wheat. Rice from the Boot Hill or wheat from local mills are the two big ones. But if it's been used by another process already, it's already been colonized by someone else.
You also have a question on Facebook. We don't use our compost all the time, mostly in the spring. So with Bokashi, since it's available after 2 weeks, is there a way to store it until you need it?
Yeah, so the storage, you're trying to store it as soil, not as raw Bokashi. So for wintertime, if you have a raised bed in the garden, you can usually still dig that. The soil's typically friable all year long, so you can just continue the process as normal, or make a little wire enclosure, usually 2 feet tall and 4 by 4, and just have a couple piles or buckets of garden soil, put a layer beneath, put the Bokashi down, and the layer on top. And over the winter, that bin will raise up in volume. And in the spring, you can just spread that as a soil for your garden as you would compost.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool, I'll go on. Talking about how we make bran. So this is in the middle of a giant pile of wheat bran. That's right from the mill. We add water. It needs to be moist enough to support the microbes. We add effective microbes. EM1 is the trade name. And we add unsulfured molasses as a sugar source. We pack it into a 50-gallon food grade drum and seal it. And then after 3 weeks, it's ready to use, and we use it either dried if we want to store it for a long time, or at this point, we're using it all fresh. It'll store fresh in an airtight bag for several months easily. We just make batches as we need them. Okay. I talked about the importance of having it be dry. The reason is contamination. You have this carbon-rich substrate. You know, the second it gets damp, it's a perfect habitat for all kinds of things. You're intentionally using effective microbes for Bokashi, but it's also great for white mold, green mold. You're thinking, really, I mean, anything in the air, yeast. The picture on the right is a drum that, it's a top layer drum, got wet in transit, and even though we inoculated it, you see the white and yellow mold on the top. Just a reminder, if you're making your own, needs to be not sterile, but certainly a very clean environment. Not as clean as you would need for, say, mushroom cultivation, but pretty clean, you know, kitchen clean, not, you know, backyard clean. If you see contamination, if it doesn't smell wholesome, slightly yeasty, like a sour rye bread, just, you know, you got to toss it, put it in a hot pile, bury it, you know, don't use it, because you're growing something else from the environment that you didn't intend to. That's my public safety, my only real risk here. Talking about scalability. All right, so these are 3 containers we've used extensively. Again, airtight, drainage source, and then manageable. Food waste is pretty dense. You know, it weighs a lot. There's a lot of water in it initially. So it's easy to scale up the mixing and the packing of the bin, but 3 weeks later, it can be really hard to move the thing. So whatever you're using, you know, make sure you can either lift it or put on a dolly. Don't put like a 96-gallon roller in your basement. You know, you can drain it just fine, but you can't get up the stairs. So on the left is our Bokashi kit. The middle, this is the drums we used when we were trialing it. We started, we went from our household size up to 50 gallons at a time, a couple hundred pounds, 240 pounds. At time to see how it worked. They liked it. See in the middle, it's a food grade drum. The lining, it was used originally to, I think, lemon juice concentrate or something, food product. And we have a spigot we drilled in with a seal, keeps the leachate in. Works well. It's on a pallet, so you can move it, or you can put it on a dolly. It's pretty heavy. On the right, there's a 96-gallon roller. That's like 400 pounds when it's full. We've actually changed how the lid is secured now, so you don't have all these clamps. But the point is, it's airtight and it has wheels, so you can move it around. You can load it on the trailer you see in the back. So whenever you're doing this, even a 5-gallon bucket from a big box store is going to weigh, 35 pounds probably. And so get a couple of those, you're lugging some weight. If you go bigger, you want to do community garden Bokashi, you got to think, put it near where the beds are, because like anything else, materials management is mainly moving things around. Here are pictures of filling it. So it's all food waste, layer brand, packed tight. The left is the household kit. There's the drum and the roller again. And leachate. So the color of the leachate changes over time. The initial ones on the left, it's pretty dark and cloudy. That's, again, fats from the food probably. It lightens as you go. The middle one's probably the second week. Lighter, of course, we're dealing with a 50-gallon drum, so volume's a lot higher. On the right, I'm just showing you one way of getting leachate out of a roller is to put a custom spigot in, drill a spigot in intentionally. Finished Bokashi should be, it looks like food. It's very dry. It's going to be browner with a white coating of fungi on it. You won't see like big plumes of fungi or anything. It's just a white fuzz over the top. These are 3 different batches. They're all finished. You notice hard-skinned fruits. The apple is surely treated with something to prolong shelf life, and that's why it still looks like an apple. Oranges, they're all coated with wax and other stuff. They look like they are oranges still. Everything else, it's kind of pickled, wrinkly, innocuous.
Matt, can you cover the use or reuse of leachate again?
Yeah, so leachate, I'll go back a couple pictures. So leachate, I'm gonna amend my initial comment to Bob. So I don't think it's a great idea to use the first couple leachates, because if you are, just like anything else, if you're putting spinach, meat, the food items that are most commonly recalled for pathogens in there, you need to wait until the microbes have a chance to render them non-viable before you start dealing with leachate. The risk would be inadvertently colonizing a garden soil with something unintentional. But let's say the second drain on, third drain on, it's going to be a fairly pungent, very sour smelling liquid that's relatively clear. It's acidic, so dilute it, and then you can apply it to your, anywhere. You can apply it to your garden, to your yard. You can pour it down the drain. It's not harmful. It's just just liquid. But typically we see people dilute it in 50-to-1 is a pretty solid recommendation. And then on your yard, any kind of plant, if you have acid loving plants, blueberry bushes or hydrangea come to mind, you can dilute it a little bit less, significantly less, and then pour it around the root zone to provide acid form. It does contain, at that point, a lot of effective microbes also, because they're reproducing in there. So you are helping to inoculate your yard and garden with some of these beneficial microbes also. I'm going to jump ahead to use. This is residential use. Bury in the soil, add to an existing hot pile. Because it's been effectively pre-composted, it's already been eaten by one set of organisms, it heats up really fast. So if you have a backyard bin and you have a typical waste stream, Bokashing it drains the liquid out, makes it easier to manage, and then makes it more accessible to those hot piles. The second it hits oxygen, it's going to be fair game for all the aerobic organisms that you normally have in a hot pile. So even though you do it in an anaerobic system, you put in air, boom, it's game on. So it breaks down incredibly fast in a hot pile. And we actually now, we feed a lot to composting worms, and the rest we bury a lot in the soil. And the rest we make hot piles out of and love it. Food waste, direct food waste hot piles, they're hard to heat up, and you get pockets of food waste that are resistant to heating or don't get mixed well, and you get these clumps that can be, kind of off-putting. Bokashi, it's in there. It just goes. It's really neat. I don't have firm stats on how much faster, but we track all our pile temperatures throughout the course, and it's really neat. You can also feed to poultry. There's some interesting research about how the fermented food waste helps the chicken or duck digestive system, provides, I guess, other beneficial microbes to their guts. The thought is that typically domesticated fowl would be feeding on human scraps primarily, supplemented by insects and grasses. And so they would typically get aged food waste. They wouldn't be at the dinner table. It'd be when it was no longer useful to humans. So makes sense to me. And on the left, you just see, this is one of our worm bins. You can see the worms are just all over the Bokashi.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like through the Bokashi method, you're really like giving a monster energy shot drink to an athlete who's worn out, right? Because he's ready to go, get all sweaty and get that heat through his metabolism. That's where the heat comes from, right? And so if we're feeding the microbes, all of a sudden they start exercising more, and then that's the heat exchange from their energy use that they get excited about eating and engaging, right?
Yeah, Bokashi is much more nutrient rich than similar volume of raw food waste. All you're doing is taking out the liquid and then breaking down cell walls. So you're not taking away any of the minerals that are in there or any of the other nutrients in the food. So it's a very effective way of feeding the soil. You can see a couple pictures here. This is my backyard. So I think in the back you can see a bean pole, pretty shallow hole covered with dirt. I'll show a picture in the next slide, I think, of what it looks like after a few weeks. Oh yeah, here we go. So the farm is a former hayfield, and it's was part of a USDA program in the 50s to terrace it. So some of the soil has really been degraded over the past 60 years through kind of typical USDA recommended management practices. Heavily clay, the rest of it's air-blown loess. It's kind of a silt that settled over time. And hay extraction can be really hard on soil. So really low organic matter, a lot of mineral deficiency. This is a new bed that we're putting in. So it's a 30-inch wide bed, 100 feet long. So we trenched it, a couple shovels, dug a 10-inch deep trench length of the bed, poured in. It's probably 1,000 pounds of Bokashi, covered it again, and then waited a few weeks. We typically do this only when we're building new beds. We're no-till farm. We don't disturb the soil once we've got the bed in operation. We manage the health through cover cropping and other amendments. This would be a good time. I'd recommend adding organic amendments to your garden when you have the soil disturbed anyway. We use azomite, putting a pitch out for azomite. It's a trade name for volcanic mineral that contains every trace element, all the 18 necessary for plant health. And
It's awesome.
Yeah,
Love
it's
azomite.
awesome. Yeah, azomite's great. I'd also recommend adding vermicompost at this time. Worm castings are another great source of microbes. So if you have a worm bin, it's a great time to sprinkle some worm castings into that pit. You're inoculating with Bokashi, inoculate with other soil microbes that have come through worm guts. Really a great one too. And then give it a few weeks, and once it's had time to be eaten by the soil microbes and earthworms, it's typically when we plant a cover crop to try to cycle those nutrients through before we put a cash crop of flowers or herbs in. Other things you can do, well, on the kind of larger row crop scale, you often see people slurring it. They take it and grind it in either a agricultural feed mixer with a screw mechanism to chop in a really fine slurry, add water to dilute. Some people add lime to it. Missouri can be very low pH. We're all limestone escarpment for the most part, so pH can be pretty low in our fields. So add lime at that time into the slurry. I want to caution people, agricultural lime is not the same as dolomitic lime. So if you go to the store and pick up a bag of lime, some of it has really high levels of magnesium. Dolomitic lime is mined from high mag sources. Magnesium is required for plant health, but it's also toxic to plants at a higher level. So if you're adding lime, really look to see if you're adding agricultural lime or not. And unless you are totally magnesium deficient, go with ag lime, not dolomitic lime. And then you spread in the field. And you can spread on your garden, your yard too, and then water it in. Digging in the soil, I showed you the trenching that we do for new beds. Soil box I talked about earlier. It's where you take a wire frame, typically a 4x8 panel, either what's used for cattle fencing or some of the really thin concrete forms. It's easy to work with. You can bend it by hand and make a box, bury in the ground, 6 inches so it's stable. And then you add a layer of Bokashi and a layer of soil and just build that up. And then whenever you need it, you just open that bin and then use the soil to add additional soil to your existing garden or make a new bed out of it, or checkerboard. So if you have a raised bed, they typically don't freeze hard enough for you not be able to work them. So you just do, say, a 18-inch square, bury a month Bokashi, cover it. Next time, the neighboring square, and just work your way down like a checkerboard. And then by the time you've filled it, certainly the first checker square is totally absorbed and you can just repeat it. Those are the main options we see. And I apologize. Oh yeah, here we go. This is the picture of what it looks like. I'm not apologizing. So these are two different Bokashi burials, 3 weeks after burial. The one on the right's from my home garden. What you're seeing is just a few eggshells. They're really, how eggshells get after being in the soil a long time, you can bend them. They're really pliable. That's all you see. I put probably 30 pounds of Bokashi in there, and that's a shovel load that went 14 inches deep. And there's nothing visible. It's slightly darker. You can see at the top left of the picture, there's a clump of The old soil, it's not great, kind of grayer and drier. And then the Bokashi is just undifferentiated organic matter. The one on the left, that's actually the bed I showed you where we added 1,000 pounds to the 100-foot bed. This is a shovel load. It's just soil. You can't tell we ever buried anything there. And it's just a nice, crumbly, wonderful soil ready to go now. That's what I had. Questions or comments, we're here to answer them. You can always email us. The farmer at BLH Farm is our group mailbox. It's Adam and I. I'm Matt at BLH Farm. Adam at BLH Farm. Email any of us. We really want to answer questions about Bokashi or other composting, worm composting, hot composting. We have some resources on the website. We have an Instagram page where we try to post what we're doing, and we have a blog, try to keep up on what we're doing on the farm, some kind of longer form discussions of no-till farm methods.
Matt Arthur, you are a great spokesperson for farming and the food movement and growing healthy soil. I mean, I really appreciate this really informative program that you gave us all some really great insights and information for. Really appreciate what you guys are doing. How long have you had the farm operation going?
This is our third season. I guess the fall will be our fourth fall planting.
That's great. And you guys focus on flowers and herbs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we run a flower CSA in the summer. So we do door delivery of bouquets and grow some herbs, medicinal herbs for herbaries in St. Louis.
Oh, that's great. Really appreciate it. We had a lot of real good questions. I don't think we have anything else coming into the chat at this point. But I'd like to just another shout out for folks to come back tomorrow at 1 o'clock for our event with Kitchen House Coffee and the chef there talking about reusing leftovers. So it should be a tasty seminar tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and then Thursday at 12 o'clock with Margaret Lilly talking about strategies to reduce food waste at home. Matt Arthur, and just really appreciate everything that you're doing out there in this local food movement and helping folks out. And we know that reducing is the first step, and glad that you're there to help recycle things really in a nice circular economy back into the soil and get our soils back in shape so that they can support us for a long time to come.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Adam and I are really excited to be here talking about this.
All right. Yeah, super excited. Thank you, Adam. And thanks everybody for being here. We'll let you get back to your day, and we're out.